Morning. We'll call the Kaneohe County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Please stand with me while we recite the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always get ahead of people because I remember my Catholic school, grade school days where we didn't have as many pauses and things that we do today. So welcome, everybody. I want to thank you for being here. Usually we have some people that are with us online as well because we can watch us on YouTube. And so welcome to all of you folks as well. So we have a pretty busy agenda today, and thank you all for being here. First thing on our agenda, you all received the approval of the Legal and Compass board minutes. This is the consent agenda now, and the auditor's warrants and claims. How do you wish to proceed on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson moves on the consent agenda. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Dale Anderson seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, under general business discussions, the first item of discussion is Resolution 2023-33, AMP inducement reimbursement resolution. I'm going to turn it over to the administrator to talk about this resolution.
Thank you. We have Andy here with AMP, and he is going to present the resolution. Also, Chair, we have Bruce Kimmel with Ehlers, our bond counsel. So if there are any questions regarding our bond rating or bank qualified status, he will be on the call, available to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. Welcome, Bruce. Bruce, can you hear us?
I can, yes. Thank you, and good morning.
And we're hearing you fine too, so welcome.
Thank you. Again, my name is Andy Dvorak, VP of Business Development for AMP Americas. AMP Americas is a renewable development company. We specialize in anaerobic digestion, is a process in which we convert manure into a biogas stream, and then we use that for beneficial use. Traditionally, we've produced electricity, and we've also used the gas into the transportation market. We're working with Riverview Farms on a project that is across 3 different counties, and that project will bring gas from those 4 different farms that we're building projects on into a central location and inject it into the Alliance pipeline. So we're before the board today to bring up a resolution in our desire to keep open the option for long-term financing. The project is fully funded, we're under construction, everything's moving forward. We don't have any immediate plans to put in bond financing, but we need to put in place a resolution at a county level where the projects are being built so that we protect the ability to, in the future, look at bond financing as an option. And so we put forth the resolution in front of the board. We've had conversations with Kelsey as well as with bond counsel to review that resolution, and we're here to answer any questions that come about. Just to give a tiny bit of history on AMP Americas, we're in the community. We've been in existence as a company since 2011. We have 14 projects across the country, and we represent about 15% market share on total gas produced in the dairy space from anaerobic digestion. We have an operating project in Morris, Minnesota, where we bring gas from 3 different digesters to a central location, and we inject again into that same Alliance pipeline. So we're replicating an existing project and a successful project now. The project, like I said, here is under construction, and we believe it'll be fully operational in the next year or so.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr.
Dvorak.
Dvorak, thank you. One of the questions I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Carter.
Sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know there are folks who are probably watching. We've had folks here before us talking about a different type of pipeline that they wish to construct. I assume that what you're doing is considerably different than that, yes?
It is very different. So the pipeline that we're building in conjunction with Dooley's Petroleum, which is a utility in the area, they're actually constructing the project. We're working closely with the state of Minnesota. We've submitted our proposed routing plan through the Public Utility Commission, and they're in the process of reviewing that at this time. We'll utilize various forms of right-of-way, public versus private, and along the way. The route has not been finalized because you have to go through a prescriptive easement process with the PUC. We've submitted all that documentation, and we're in the process of going through that process right now. The pipeline that will be installed for this project is no different than a pipeline installed by CenterPoint or any other utility. It's going to be a natural gas pipeline, and we will be transporting gas on that pipeline and also consuming gas off of that pipeline for the project.
And the end product essentially is the same as natural gas.
The end product that we produce is a natural gas, no different, indistinguishable from gas that you would get from CenterPoint into your house. The main difference is what accommodates that, what comes along with that gas is the environmental attributes, which is the avoidance of methane that comes with our project, and that's where we can monetize that in a different markets. Currently, the biggest market is the California market, where we sell into the transportation space. And we're able to generate credits through California, and we're also able to generate credits through the United States EPA, through a similar program that ethanol plants generate credits on. Now, long term, I think there's going to be additional markets, hydrogen markets, green ammonia. So there's a lot of different things that you can do once the gas is in the pipe and it's utilized for any various means. But right now, our plan is to utilize it in the transportation space.
But the pipeline technology itself is
Indistinguishable.
tried and proven.
Everything we're doing as far as technology, the digesters have been tried and true technologies. We've operated digesters for many, many years across the country. The technology for cleaning the gas is all tried and true technology off the shelf coming from the oil patch. And then the pipelines that we install through Dooley's will likely be installed by the same construction entities that install all of CenterPoint's. They're going to obviously go out for bid, but there's no difference in what we're doing in that regard. So we are different from the pipelines that have been around for CO2. This is specific to natural gas and no different, non-distinguishable from those.
And finally, the length of the pipeline to be constructed?
I think it's somewhere in the 30-mile range. Like I said, it's going across 3 different counties, connecting 4 farms. The Alliance pipeline runs at like a 45 across the state of Minnesota, and we will connect into that for the final connection. And it runs actually through the middle of the farms that we're building, but it's roughly around a 30-mile length. Now, we built a project similar in Morris, but we constructed, we did the first ever private company use of right-of-way in building that project. It took a long time to go through that process. It was shorter. This time around, we decided to work with a utility because it's a much bigger project. And Dooley's is known in the area. They have connections, and so it just made more sense to work with a third party in this regard.
I appreciate your clarifications. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. You don't have any pictures of where the pipeline is going to be, any pictures of how what it looks like? You're looking at $45 million max, possibly?
Well, what we've done is we've divided, so for each county, we've divided up the cost for that county because that would be the resolution for this county. The project is much bigger than that across the 3 different counties, 4 different locations, so it's larger than 45. The reason I don't have any maps to show you the routing at this point is because we are in the midst of submitting all that information to the PUC. And like I said, we have to go through this prescriptive easement process and they have to define that route. So it's in flux to a certain extent, but grand majority of the project, I'd say the most of it is going to be through public right-of-way, just like any other utility that would put pipe in the ground.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up?
You may.
Yeah. What kind of footprint does it have, and what are some of the downsides to it?
Sure. So the pipeline itself is very small footprint. I mean, you've got a construction easement that you'd put in, but it's underground. And these are typically going to be 4 to 6 inch pipes at the larger size, and they'll be small as 2 in different sections depending upon the load. On the farm, we have anaerobic digesters that take up a handful of acres, probably 2 to 3 acres on each farm. So they look like big silos. They're above ground concrete tank or above ground steel tank systems. And then the gas plants themselves are roughly an acre at each farm. They're all pretty compact systems. These are small scale in the grand scheme of gas processing. So I'd say probably 3 to 4 acres on each farm. And then we will have a central injection spot on the Alliance pipeline that is going to be a couple acres in and of itself as well.
May I follow up one more question? Just a comment first off. The concept is really good. Great. I mean, it'd be great to see that happen. But I would just kind of looking for more information at this point to get a better handle on
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we did with Stevens County is when we built that project, we have brought the county administrators out to visit the facility. We'd be happy to host a visit and a tour of our facility in Morris. It's just up the road. That's an operating system. It's going to be very similar to this in that we have 3 different farms that have a gathering system that brings it to a central facility. The only difference there is we've got a separate pipeline with CenterPoint that was built to bring gas to those farms for our natural gas usage. So there's 2 pipes there. So this project's going to have 1 pipe versus 2, but we'd be happy to host you out at a visit, give you guys a tour. We've done that with all the counties we're working with. We're just in the process of ramping all of this stuff up. And so unfortunately, we have to move ahead of the curve on the inducement just because the rules that exist in that regard is if the money is spent, it doesn't qualify. So you have to get the inducement ahead of the spend. So we're in the process of doing that right now.
Commissioner Dale Anderson.
I guess just curiosity, so you're going in the transportation side for the green credits then? Is that the reason instead
That's
of
the
going to
current
the
market today, yes.
Okay.
That's the most lucrative market that we see.
Because I was just curious why we weren't just putting it in for home heating natural gas in the area instead of running it into the,
So the federal program through the EPA is specific to transportation. So generating RINs, you can only do that through transportation today. The program in California, which is basically the federal program at a state level in addition, is also transportation based. Now, we've been very active in the state of Minnesota, working with different legislatures and working with CenterPoint in particular in looking at a Minnesota program. We'd love this gas to stay in the state and not leave the state. It's a resource that's generated here. We'd love to see it utilized here. And I think there's some long-term planning around transportation usage here, but also green buildings as well as thermal heating opportunities. These are markets that are going to evolve. You can't get away from utilizing natural gas in a lot of instances, but you can utilize different forms of gas and try to reduce your emissions in that process. And so we're at the early stage of these markets. And as we've said with Riverview and our other customers, today we're underwriting transportation into California, but in the long run, we'll be looking at all these different markets as they evolve.
if I can follow up.
Yes.
Just curious, is there other big dairies that are in the area that you can look at in the future, or have you kind of tapped into?
It's a very good point. So one of the things that we're always interested in doing is adding on to these existing projects. We do this in all of our other projects. We have operating assets in Idaho and Indiana and obviously here in Minnesota, but we're also building in Wisconsin and Kansas, and we have projects all across the country. The hub and spoke mentality, or the ability to add on projects, is very important. The reality is the cost of these projects is difficult, and so getting a project of scale on a smaller project tends to be more difficult, but we're always looking for opportunities to add on. And we've identified a couple projects and a couple farms in the area that we'd want to address once we have the base project built. We definitely would want to do that for sure. And in fact, this type of inducement is that much more important, because if we're able to cobble together more projects and then go for a bond raise in that regard, it's easier to raise a larger amount of capital in bonding than it is to raise a smaller amount. The same amount of work for more money is just more efficient in that regard.
Thank you.
So long-term planning, that would definitely be part of it for sure.
Thanks.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I just got a few questions. You talked about $45 million for the county, but it's not county dollars.
No.
It's you guys are funding the whole thing. It's going through us to get the
Yeah,
bonding.
so 100% of the project today is funded. We are not looking to raise capital. We're not looking to do anything other than build the project today. We are keeping an option open for long-term refinancing.
Okay.
So part of the difficulty in the space is that the commodities that we produce are in a type of market that is difficult to underwrite for debt today. In the future, when it's more solidified and it's a less liquid market or a more liquid market, we'll see more opportunity for financing. So today, we just don't see it. The opportunities aren't there. So we're doing a full equity investment at this stage. But in the future, we see those markets changing, and we want to be able to keep that option open in the future. So we have no immediate plans to go through a bond raise. This is not a request to do a bond raise today. This is simply, let's put some paperwork in place so that we keep the option open in the future. There would be some negotiations that would have to occur. There would have to be a whole bond process that would have to be done. So by no means is this baked in any form or fashion. It's just keeping the option open because we need this to be able to keep that option open.
Okay. And then, to be clear, the pipeline is just gas.
Just natural gas.
Yep. And So I mean, you got to have a certain quality, right?
We do.
So who is that monitored by?
So there's a couple different ways. So each farm will have its own gas plant, and at each farm you also have gas chromatographs. And a gas chromatograph is a very expensive refrigerator, for lack of a better term, where it tests the gas. If you don't meet the gas specifications that Dooley's going to require us to get into their pipe, which matches the Alliance requirement to get into their pipe, then the gas gets rejected. That gas being rejected can be utilized either in our boilers or would be flared or be reprocessed to go back in. There are periods of time when you fall out of spec, but it's seldom, because if you fall out of spec, you're losing money at the end of the day. So we're always trying to meet that spec requirement, which is on a tariff that is listed by Alliance and also through Dooley's.
Okay, and then one last question. You said that the pipeline's total length is going to be about 30 miles.
Somewhere in that order. Don't quote me on that. But
Yeah,
somewhere in that
how many miles of Canuet County? Would it be 5, 6?
It's just a few miles from County Township in the very western edge of the county,
Okay,
heading west.
okay,
South of Hannah to the county line, which is 3 miles.
okay. And could we have him say who he is and
Yeah.
where he's
Sorry,
from?
David Yost with Riverview.
Okay, thank you.
Did you get that?
That's all the questions I have.
David Yost from Riverview Dairy. Thank you. Any other questions? Did you have any follow-up questions?
With elders, I was wondering, we should talk to them. and
Sure.
have Some questions.
But before we move on
Okay.
to Bruce from Ellers, I have one. And again, I'll reiterate what Commissioner Dwayne Anderson said about this is, you're not asking, you're fully funded at this point. You're keeping your options open for refi. Let's say that the situation comes up in 2026, 2027, where you want to refi, and what we do today won't affect our bonding capacity in and this might be a better question for Bruce, but how will that affect our bonding capacity and rating going forward, should you decide to exercise the option to refi?
So, Bruce, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Bruce Kimmel with Ellers. It's really important. Andy alluded to this, but with conduit financing of this sort, it's very different from GO bonds that you would issue for county purposes, such as a building or a road project or what have you. It really is their own financing, and the only reason they're looking to you is to be able to get a tax-exempt rate through, and they also need an allocation from the state in order to get that. But then you're the so-called conduit that allows that financing to happen on a tax-exempt basis. That said, again, there's no credit pledge whatsoever from the county, so there's no general obligation pledge or anything like that. There's no impact at all on your credit rating, and there's no impact on your ability to issue debt for your own projects. So it doesn't count against your overall debt limit or any of the other individual debt limits. You may recall that state statute has little specific debt limits for different types of bonds, and none of that is germane either. The only thing that could come into play is if, depending on the timing of this financing, let's say they did ask to do it in 24 or 25, and if the county did have a significant bond issue of its own in that year, there could be a conflict with something called bank qualification. But we could negotiate a payment from them to you to compensate you for the loss of the bank qualification in that situation. So that's something that we've done on quite a few conduit deals like this, and it seems to work pretty well. I would note that specifically in 2024, you are planning on doing a financing for Glacier Ridge through the Minnesota PFA. And that deal can happen on a non-bank qualified basis. So if AMP came as soon as 2024 with a request for this, that would not jam up your ability to do that PFA financing for the Glacier project. I know I just threw a lot at you, but basically, long story short, we've looked at this pretty carefully with Kelsey and with Andy at AMP. And I'm confident that there's really no impact, either near term or short term, that we can't that we can't deal with effectively.
I would just make a slight correction. It's Glacial Lake Sanitary Sewer and Water District.
Oh, thank
not
you.
Glacial Lake.
Thank
So,
you. Yep.
So you mentioned the scenario, let's say in 2026 where they decided to refi, but we also would have a project. Do we have, would the county retain first right on our capacity, or is it whoever is there first and then you negotiate that cost that you indicated?
Yeah, it's really not an issue of capacity. So you can always go forward with your own bonding. You won't ever get jammed up in that regard. What could happen, though, is with bank qualification, you only get that benefit of being BQ designated if you're issuing less than $10 million of tax-exempt bonds or less in a given calendar year. So let's say that for some reason you have a large project like, $5 or $6 million, and of course they come forward with their, whether it's 30 or 40 million, whatever the case might be. Clearly you're going to be over that $10 million, and so none of those bonds would be bank qualified. It's an all or nothing kind of situation. Either you're under the 10 million and you're bank qualified, or you're over 10 million and none of it is bank qualified. So in that case, if that happened, we would calculate the difference between bank qualified and non-bank qualified rates, and we would figure out what that foregone benefit was for the county, and then we would negotiate for AMP or Riverview to compensate you for the lost benefit of BQ. And so it's right now that BQ benefit isn't very much, but it is something. So, we would calculate however many thousands of dollars it is, and then have that included as part of the bond issuance agreement. It's my understanding that I believe if AMP wanted to do this financing, they would probably do it as soon as next year. And again, we're not seeing a conflict with your PFA financing next year, so hopefully this issue wouldn't even come up, but we're ready to address it if it does.
Thank you.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair, good morning, Bruce. I had a follow-up question, and I think it probably doesn't impact at all, but sometimes we're very careful for our area concerning the schools and the cities. That wouldn't affect their ability to do some bonding as well.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. This is really its own deal, and again, it doesn't impact the county or any of the other jurisdictions.
So if I may follow up. So what I hear you saying, there is actually no risk to the county by moving forward.
Correct. There's no financial risk to the county.
Any other questions? I assume there is a small cost that we perhaps have already incurred. Mr. Kimmel's on the phone for about a half an hour now, and any costs for staff or any other kind of things that would be covered by the project?
Yeah, we can work through all those issues. I mean, we're not overly concerned about something like that.
All right. Any last comments or questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, what kind of time frame? Now, at this point, and let me just qualify my question, is that we just got this information, and it's a resolution is all we have, the information to make a decision on, just a few days ago. And we've got a lot of other things that we've been dealing with since then as well. If this was postponed until the next board meeting in 2 weeks for the action vote on this, would that be an issue at all?
Well, I mean, the issue we're running into, and to be completely forthright, is we are incurring costs on a daily basis. So we are spending money. We're a little bit behind the curve in doing this. I mean, in an ideal scenario, we would have done this, 6 months ago. So time is of the essence. So any dollars spent today, we lose qualification. We do have a little bit of a look back period. So timely is best, but I would totally respect the process that exists.
May I follow up?
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Go ahead,
Commissioner. I was
Bruce.
just going to clarify on that a little bit.
Yeah, please do, Bruce.
Yeah, so what Andy's referring to is the main part of this is what's known in the business as a reimbursement resolution. And this is a requirement under federal law in order to be able to look back, at a future financing time and say, yes, we incurred these costs on a taxable basis through their existing financing, but we've reserved the right to do this takeout financing with tax-exempt bonds. And so there is, like Andy said, a look-back period that you can capture some previous costs, but in terms of just keeping as much flexibility open and available, that's what he's referring to in terms of getting this sort of flag planted in the sand as the possible ability to reimburse these current day costs with a future tax-exempt financing. The other thing I would mention, and I meant to mention this before, is that none of this is actually requiring you to do it. There is a provision in this resolution that says you still have the ability to just walk away for any reason and to say, this doesn't feel right, we don't feel like we're being compensated enough, we don't like the project, whatever the case might be. And so even though you're sort of planting this flag in the sand, it's not obligating the county in any way to actually do the financing. And so unless you do have some major concerns about it in some regard, I would be comfortable as your financial advisor recommending you to move forward today with this preliminary step, knowing that, before any actual financing, there would be much more discussion to come.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other?
One more
Go ahead.
question, please. Yeah. The other two counties, have they passed this resolution?
So we've met with Chippewa and we've met with Candiota, everything we're in process with the SWIFT.
Mm-hmm.
SWIFT has signed off, and Chippewa is in process of evaluating as well.
So they're,
Taking it this morning.
and are they connected together? Do you need them all at once to move forward, or?
Well, there's separate separate
So you
counties.
could just, yeah, so
But,
you want one
but we would
project.
like to be able to do a bond financing across the entire project, because it is known as Swift RNG, one single project. It just happens to cross into 3 different counties. So we have to go through the 3 different counties to go through that process.
In the future, I'd appreciate kind of knowing what's coming up, and it wouldn't have to be a last minute type of thing that you need this done to save you money. That this is in the works, and you could come and give a presentation, because I kind of like to. Big dollar amounts of $45 million makes me think, well, I shouldn't really sleep on this, and then because if in case I have any other questions, because you're kind of caught, you're still thinking about the questions. I can easily leave here and think, oh, I should have asked this or done that.
Well, what I do like to do as a follow-up, like I said, is we're in the process of constructing the project right now. With the bases of our digesters are built. We're about to erect the digesters in the next month or so. So we are in the midst of construction. As we move forward, we'd love to keep the board apprised of the situation. We'd love to get you guys out to visit our facilities in Morris. So this is a typical process where there's a lot of planning that comes together to get things moving and started. And once we get rolling along the lake, we'd love to include you guys more in the process, for sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Dale Anderson.
I guess I would like to move the resolution 2023-33.
Commissioner Dale Anderson moves Resolution 2023-33. Do I hear a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson seconds. Any discussion?
So,
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
so thanks, Mr. Chair. So I feel a lot more comfortable when you pointed that out, or whoever pointed out. Number 12, it says the county's adoption of this resolution does not obligate the county directly or indirectly to issue the bonds in the future. So we can say we don't want to do it. So it does give us a chance now to think about it a little more. Even though we've adopted this resolution, we can kind of move forward thinking about it, and they can also move forward and hopefully be protected under whatever kind
Yeah, I
of
appreciate that, and that's a very good clarification.
status.
We're not asking for any type of bond issuance process today. We're just literally checking a box that we need to as far as keeping the option open in the future. So I appreciate that clarification.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll move on from there.
Thanks, and if there's any follow-up questions, Kelsey has my details. I'd love to stay in touch with you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one of the things I should have said before we started this meeting today, so I'll say it now. So far, we've not had an issue, but if everybody would turn your phones off, if you haven't already, we do order out for pizza if somebody's phone rings, and the owner of that phone will get the bill for the. So, thank you. Now we'll move on to the discussion of the additional recycling cart, or recycling cart fee. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Gear, Environmental Services Director, here before you this morning. And just a little background to the recycling program. It was in August of 2020 that we discontinued the multi-sort facility that we had and started our contract with our single sort program. And then in December of 2020, there was had been some requests between August and December for additional capacity for the rural residents for recycling, and then the option for a second cart was discussed by the board and approved, and they approved that with the condition, or just with the fee of $39 for that additional cart, because that's what the contractor was charging us. So that's kind of the background of where we are today. And we have just over 7,000 rural carts that have been delivered, and 5,000, 70% being serviced. And then that gives us kind of a range. I'm sorry, this past year, then we had 170 additional residences that had requested a cart. So that 170, that's just over $6,600 then that we're taking in. And so I think this morning the board is considering maybe how to make some changes to that, whether to rescind that fee or not. That on the minimum side, if we just there was no additional request for additional carts, then the county would be covering that $6,600. On the high end, if all 5,000 additional rural residents requested a cart, then we're pushing 200,000. So with maybe what information the board may knows or constituents you visited with, you can, I think, take that information and make a decision to whether to, maintain the fee or maybe possibly rescind it. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Gear. This is a topic that I hear about a lot in probably up until this week. The number one topic since we've adopted it. And it feels to me, as I've indicated to you and the administrator, that by charging $3 to the rural residents that don't get every 2-week pickup like the city residents do, kind of feels like rubbing salt in the wound. Number one, we have to wait every 4 weeks for getting our recycling picked up versus every 2 weeks in the city. And then we charge them for the use of the cart. The additional cart. And I just think it's not a very fair practice. I don't anticipate we're going to have everybody in the county because they take up a lot of space. And what's happening right now is people who don't have enough space in their carts throw it in the garbage. And the whole point of the cart was to keep it out of the landfill. So I would support that we rescind the fee that we're charging for the extra cart.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
This is a question for Ms. Baker, I think. This is not in the budget possibly for next year's budget at all, so.
No.
And maybe you can just help me off the top of your head, just generally, I'm trying to remember the budget. I could have looked at it myself probably, but right now we're spending, what, $750,000 to $1 million for recycling a year?
Close, yes, approximately, between 800,000 and 900,000.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
And this would be an addition above that.
I guess, Gary, my question.
Commissioner,
Oh,
Commissioner,
go ahead.
Sorry, Corky. I guess my question is, what would it cost if we went to everybody getting it every 2 weeks? I mean, I'll be real honest. I mean, I'm out in the end of the line up there. And when my cart gets full, it goes in the garbage. And it's not going to make it a month. So I guess my question is, what does it cost if we would just go to everybody getting it 2 weeks?
We did look at that initially, and it would be another And I haven't had a recent proposal before the
Right.
contractor, but it would be in the $250,000 range. There's just, for what it works, there's just too many miles and not enough density. And
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chair. My concern would be if we did something like that, one every 2 weeks, I don't know if the contractor could actually come through with that, because aren't they kind of short of labor and manpower?
I guess I wouldn't want to speak for him,
Yeah,
but yes, I know that he has had difficulty basically just with manpower. And vehicles, acquiring the trucks has been significantly difficult for him as well. And then he's trying to maintain existing trucks because the new ones aren't available. So that's kind of the same problem a lot of the workforce is in across the.
Yeah, and the other thing is I have gotten calls about this as well. But when I tell them that there are options, they can bring their recycling to Wilmer and drop it off, that usually makes most people are satisfied by that. And some actually have opted to just bring it in directly, and then they don't have to remember to bring a cart out to the end of their driveway every time that it's recycling day. So
Correct. That is an option.
Did you?
Yes, if I may follow up, just from a fiscal point of view, by looking at doing it, we're talking about close to another % on our levy then, not this coming year because it's not in the budget, but it would be the year after that, right? So we're stacking that up with the other votes we had just recently about increasing, using reserve dollars that's going to end up on our levy then for increases of another 2% at the end of next year. So we're already looking at maybe 2 to 3% levy for our budget we haven't even started to think about for the year after. But just be aware that we have to be conscious of the levy.
Well, I think this discussion actually has digressed to the cycle of pickups versus the question of charging for the cart. I'm going to make a motion that we rescind the $3 per month fee on the extra cart that people request. No second, so that motion dies for a second, and thank you for that. But when we do have another conversation, I will say this, that we're looking at the cost of adding it to 2 weeks. We never get the question of what would happen if everybody was at 3 weeks. And the cost of the second week that the city gets, all the taxpayers in the county pay for that. And so the countryside, the people in the country are subsidizing that extra pickup in the city. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
if
go
I may.
ahead.
If I may, I think, maybe Gary and I can look at some of these options that commissioners had regarding the costs and week timelines. And maybe in a couple board meetings, report back on what those costs would be if we change the timeline and pick up
That'd be
our
nice.
carts.
Mr. Chair, I think though, the people that should be in that loop on that should also be the contractor, because maybe they can't keep up
No,
with that.
and I don't disagree with that. Changing a contract in the middle of the contract is going to be very
Right.
difficult.
And our contract, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is up December 31st, 2024. 2025. So we do have some time to work on this. But I do think it's good if we can find out some of that information that you've all asked on, and we can report back.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Administrator Baker. I think that's an excellent idea. I think we can, as a board, problem solve this and make it a win-win situation some way and get more information on that and bring it back. I would like to see that.
Roger.
All right, one last comment or question, I'm not sure what it is.
Well, I guess I want to just say that when I was campaigning, this was probably the number one topic that people talk about. So I guess I totally agree with Corky, and I mean, I'm not against what Roger's asking either, but I just think we need more information and really need to sit down and look at this a little more in depth. We got to find the compromise of what it actually is going to work. But I think we need to look at it again soon.
Make some progress in that direction, yes.
All right, thank you for the discussion. We will take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene the Kaneohe County Board of Commission. Next up on our agenda is the discussion of the environmental assessment worksheet. Eric Van Dyken from our Environmental Services Department will lead that discussion. I just want to remind everybody present that this is not a public hearing today, so there won't be any public input from either the proposers or the people that are here with concerns. So there's no public hearing today. The proposers are here, and Mr. Van Dyken, all questions will be directed to Mr. Van Dyken. Ask all the board members to be recognized and direct your questions to staff rather than people in the audience. And if staff can't answer the question, then he will turn to whomever may be able to do that. So with that, Eric, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Eric Van Dyken, County Zoning Administrator, here before you today with a request for action on the environmental assessment worksheet that has been prepared, published, and responded to here for a proposed Tepe Tonka Golf Course project. The project is located in sections 13 and 14 of Lake Andrew Township. It consists of an 18-hole golf course with 9-hole short course, some various facilities associated with that, a clubhouse, maintenance facilities, a comfort station, and some housing proposed associated with it. The project is approximately 228 acres in size. I'll give you a couple quick background information on the environmental review process, and I'm going to give you also a few shortened abbreviations here that may come up, and I don't want anybody to be confused about the different abbreviations that we're using. The Minnesota Environmental Quality Board governs environmental review, and we often refer to them as the EQB. So if you hear me say EQB, that's the governmental agency in charge of this program. We are talking today about an environmental assessment worksheet, often shortened to EAW. And you'll also hear environmental impact statement, often shortened to EIS. And then the last one I would note is that Kaneohe County in this instance is the responsible governmental unit, often referred to as the RGU. That means as the permitting agency locally for this project, you get to make a decision on the environmental review. A couple things to know about environmental review. It might be helpful to know what environmental review is not. Environmental review is not an approval of a project. It's not a permit. It's not an up or down vote on the project. It doesn't authorize a project or stop a project. It simply provides an organized way for the public, the local governmental unit or the RGU, and the project proponent to get a feel for and a picture for some of the things that may be at stake. So it benefits then all three of those entities. The public gets to have the door pulled back on what's being proposed even before any permitting process takes place. The project proponent has an opportunity to see areas of opportunity or areas of concern and then mold and shape a project so that it avoids the impacts or mitigates potential impacts. And then the regulatory authority has an opportunity to anticipate permitting and how that permitting might go, how it might proceed, and concerns that could be addressed during that permitting process and mitigations that could be required. Environmental review at this level, the EAW level, is fairly common. There are quite a few mandatory categories in rule. This project falls into a mandatory category for EAW review. Across the state, the EQB tells me that approximately in recent years, somewhere between 1 to 5% of EAWs proceed to an EIS. So it's I would say a relatively rare occurrence. Most EAWs are deemed to have adequately looked at the concerns that are out there. In the last 3 years, the state told me that there have been 2 EISs that have proceeded from an EAW. That doesn't mean a total EISs, because there are some mandatory categories for EIS that skip EAW altogether and go right to the more in-depth review. EISs can take up to several years to complete at times and range into the potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're not a light undertaking. This project here, the county and staff first had some contact on this in early 2022. At that time, we right away put environmental review on the table. We knew it was required. We discussed the need for that and that it would precede any potential permitting. Then we had some on and off discussions, through 2022. And in early 2023, right about April, the project proponents were able to secure ownership of the land in question, and that allowed us to open up deeper discussions and begin really diving into environmental review. That proceeded through the summer months, and we arrived at August 1st when we had a completed document. That document then was sent to the EQB for publication. It was sent out to a mandatory distribution list, and then a press release went out noting that the comment period for the EAW would be from August 8th through September 7th. So we find ourselves now at the period where the Minnesota rules require a decision on whether or not an EIS should be required based on what the EIW discovered and discussed. The state rule does require that that decision for a body like yourself that meets sporadically be made within between 3 and 30 days from the end of the comment period. So October 7th will be that 30 days. So we are at a point where a decision is needed. Of course, you had one other meeting potentially during that time. That was a meeting at which we knew our board chair was not going to be available. And so the decision was made not to try to bring that forward at that time for an incomplete board presence. A couple things to note about the documents that staff has placed in your packet. The supplemental submittal consists of the state required response to comments. During the comment period, the public and all those that are notified of the EAW's availability are allowed to comment. And the county did receive 9 comments during the comment period. 8 of those comments were from the general public, I would say, as opposed to the agency side. We did receive 1 comment letter from the Department of Natural Resources. During the review period also, I would note that staff and the project proponents and their consultant had a chance to meet a little bit more in depth with the Department of Natural Resource staff. We had 6 different DNR staff on a joint call to kind of dig even deeper with the DNR on some of the EAW content. And then subsequently, staff has also had opportunities to consult with State Historic Preservation Office, the Kansas Historical Society, Department of Health staff, our solid waste administrator here locally, landfill manager, got feedback on traffic parts of it from our public works director, and then also last and certainly not least with our county attorney Shane Baker, who's been able to help on the findings and the supplemental submittal document. The staff request today would be for the board to accept the supplemental submittal as the responses to comments received, and to adopt the findings of fact and conclusion. The findings of fact and conclusion, as recommended by staff, do have the effect of making a negative declaration on the need for an environmental impact statement. The state dictates that consideration be made in the areas that you see laid out before you in the proposed findings of fact, A through D there. Minnesota Rules, Chapter 4410 says these are the things that you will consider as you consider that declaration or that decision. The specific phrase that typically gets used and the rule uses around the question of environmental review is the potential for significant environmental effects. So that's really, you'll see that phrase come up over and over again in different places in the EAW and in the findings and the conclusion. And when we take the EAW in its entirety, all the supporting information, the response to comments, the consideration of concerns raised, it is a staff belief that it's fairly well established that there is no potential for significant environmental effects. And with those findings and conclusion, staff would entertain any questions that you may have.
So for any questions from the board? Roger. Commissioner Dwayne, or Dale.
I guess I don't really have a question. I maybe have a statement. I guess I just have a lot of concerns about the pollution that's coming from the landfill. We got about 4 or 5 different things to me that make this a unique situation and really make it something different than we've probably dealt with in the past, and something that really concerns a lot of people in the area. Is the pollution from the landfill. We have a start of a watershed that is, goes down and goes into Lake Florida and moves its way down. We have sandy soils that are very permeable and really are hard to hold nitrogen in without them leaching through. And we have natural resources in that area that are just really going to be, to me, affected by this also. So I guess I have them concerns just to start out with, and there's probably a lot of other things that I still have questions over too, but I understand the worksheet, I understand all that, but to me, them issues, we need to follow the science to me, and if we do the assessment, at least we have the true answers of them concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. I would ask that at this point, we have that discussion is part of the discussion of any motion that comes forward. So at this point, let's restrict ourselves to questions for staff. Commissioner Burton.
Well, I might, I'm not sure this will apply at all, but in reference to, there is a major concern about the landfill. So you came up with this on a negative concern about the landfill. Can you explain that in detail? I talked to you in person, and I talked to a lot of other people about this, but for the public as well, of the same question about following the science. And
Yeah, so a couple things to note about that. We, in staff's consideration of those concerns, we have had significant conversation specifically with our landfill manager and our solid waste administrator. They're the ones that are tasked with, on a daily basis, being concerned about this plume. The county has spent quite a bit of time and energy and money over the years keeping close track of this plume. One of the things to note about the plume of contamination is that it is in a shallow or a surface aquifer. It's not in a deep aquifer. And the Department of Health actually even lets, just for a matter of kind of making a little bit of an illustration, Department of Health, who regulates any concerns about impact to people and what these chemicals might do to somebody's health, they would allow you today to go and drill a well right through this contamination plume down to the deeper aquifer and use it for domestic production. There are wells in the plume proper. So it gives us a little bit of an understanding then of what's the concern of what's in the shallow aquifer versus what might get down to a deeper aquifer. The environmental assessment worksheet does explain that the soil layers in this area are such that there's significant, what we would call a confining layer of basically impermeable clay layer that doesn't allow water to readily pass through it. The scientific term would be that it has a low hydraulic conductivity. So water doesn't go through it well. So what that means is we have, in the shallow aquifer, we have more of a lateral movement. We have a lateral movement. That's why you see that plume going out, stretching like that. It's generally moving towards Shakopee Creek with the expectation that someday it will express itself in the wetlands near the creek and potentially in the creek itself, which the conclusion of that is actually for the chemicals that are being monitored in there is actually a fairly positive outcome, because those chemicals, when they're exposed to the atmosphere, volatilize rather rapidly, which means they escape into the air, similar to like if you spill some gas on the ground, it does volatilize and go into the atmosphere fairly quickly. So it'd be a similar process that might happen as that expresses itself out towards Shakopee Creek. That's a bit of an overview. We're also encouraged generally in a process like this when the agency that oversees this, the Pollution Control Agency and the Department of Health, specifically that have to do with quality, the one on the pollutant side and one on the public health side, expressed to us no concerns whatsoever. I have talked with Bob Nielsen, who's out of the New Ulm office for the Department of Health, pretty significantly. Bob knows this area well. He knows the concerns about that plume, and Bob had no concerns whatsoever about this project interacting with or causing this plume to be exacerbated or threaten public health in any way.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up? Yes. How is it currently being monitored to see if it's expanding or not or being tested?
There are a series of monitoring wells around. I would not be the guy to give you the details on the frequency of monitoring and such. I can tell you that it's a significant effort. The county pays a significant amount of money to a consultant to do this work for us, but I wouldn't be probably your detail guy on the report itself.
But as a general, thank you.
So, Mr. Van Dyken, you mentioned a number of our own departments that were consulted, like Mr. Gear and Health and whatever. I see on the EAW, the Environmental Assessment Worksheet, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Department of Commerce. I assume they all, and I think I count 12 of them there, they all received the EAW, correct?
That's correct. So on page 2 there, one of the things we wanted to highlight a little bit is sometimes the comments that you don't receive also tell a bit of a story. And because we have significant regulatory authority and we have significant mandates under these various agencies, all of which had the EW sent directly to them as mandated by the EQB, and all of which did not comment. And that does include a pretty significant list of state and federal agencies.
So did no one on this list comment?
No one on that list in front of you. The only agency comment we received for the Department of Natural Resource comments, I would characterize those as very similar to the conversation we had with them, which were encouragements and reminders and offerings to work in partnership. And when we had a phone conversation with them, we did have some good contact made between some of the project staff who was already making connections with some of their non-game wildlife folks on some opportunities for enhancement of some of the habitat on site.
And all these agencies that were notified of the EAW, should an issue arise during construction or during operation, they still have regulatory authority, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's an important point to note, and I would note specifically under the findings that that's recognized under item C. The state does, in this environmental review process, recognize that there's significant assurance that we can place in the idea of ongoing regulatory authority, that these type of projects are not just turned loose to do as they see fit. And so one of the things that the state specifically says that the RGU must consider is how much will this project be subject to rules and regulations and oversight on an ongoing basis? And so many of these, if not all of these agencies would have some level of control on certain aspects of the process. You'll notice also during the EAW that it recognizes the specific permits that would be needed up and down the line. Some of them don't necessarily require permits, but are subject to regulation. So like Department of Agriculture would regulate things such as application of certain types of chemicals that are regulated under their jurisdiction.
Thank you. And then maybe an example of that, because I'm just trying to follow up to see if I'm understanding it correctly. Let's say that there is a question of a wetland drainage, unauthorized wetland drainage. We have what we call a TEP council, I believe, or a committee. Can you maybe use that example as how that might play out should something be discovered if that wasn't being done properly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The TEP panel, I maybe get some of these members wrong, but it includes our WAC administrator, or Wetlands Conservation Act administrator, Gary Gear, and it has members of the Soil and Water Conservation District, Board of Water and Soil Resources, Department of Natural Resources, and I believe Army Corps of Engineers as needed. I think that's it. I'm getting a nod from Gary. So that group acts as essentially the oversight group that would deal with things like requests to potentially impact wetlands, or if there were unauthorized potentially impacts to wetlands, what kind of corrections might be ordered, that kind of thing. And parsing, even if someone identifies wetlands and says, hey, here's, I think, the boundary of that, even that needs to be approved by that panel.
Okay, thank you. And this will be my last question. So there are sort of a wide range of concerns and justifiable concerns. Some of them have to do with social issues. Some of them have to do with, how the landscape changes. Our purview is rather narrow in its scope, correct? In what we are considering with this environmental assessment worksheet. In other words, the thought of it changing, the landscape is not something that we necessarily consider, or is that something we consider in this?
Well, you could characterize it, I guess, in a couple different ways. There is some breadth through the EAW process. I mean, it does consider some cultural aspects, right? Things of cultural significance and stuff. So it's not necessarily even environment in the narrowest sense of environment. It considers things like traffic. I mean, if you get up in the Twin Cities and you do an EAW, traffic may be your main consideration in an environmental assessment worksheet. So in some ways you could say it has a broad scope, but it doesn't, and it can't consider all social aspects, some of which can be considered in a conditional use permit process. Not every social question can, but some of which can. But there certainly are questions that this can't answer for us as well. So yes, to that extent, it is limited. It is not an all-encompassing neighborhood consideration.
Are there other questions of the commission? Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
So I don't know which questions I'm allowed to ask right now, but the wells that they would possibly potentially drill for irrigation, that's regulated, correct? And who regulates that? Is that the DNR or?
So there would be actually two agencies. So the Minnesota Department of Health is the one that issues permits for wells.
Okay.
And the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources regulates water appropriation at certain volumes. They would be of a volume that would require water appropriation permitting through the Department of Natural Resources. So they would have permits through both of those. The Department of Natural Resources, under that water appropriation program, is specifically tasked with providing certain protections. A couple of them of note from the EAW is that someone who appropriates water under such a permit is not allowed to negatively impact area domestic well users. and they're not allowed to negatively impact other water resources. So if the Department of Natural Resources was to determine that water use of a certain amount as proposed could, say, take a water resource and affect its hydrology such that a stream doesn't flow or a spring does not flow anymore or something like that, the Department of Natural Resources would be tasked with protecting that resource. And if it's discovered later, then the Department of Natural Resources would be tasked with providing the remediation of that. So they could tell them to stop using water. They could require the replacement of an impacted well, something of that nature.
Okay, so when they do that, is that similar to like agricultural irrigation systems, how they monitor it? I mean, I think the DNR monitors ag irrigation, and if they determine that a well is drawing down the water too much, they can shut them down, right? I mean,
That is correct.
yeah, okay. And then when they do that, do they also, or is it maybe that's the Department of Health then, that maybe when they monitor the wells, they also monitor any kind of, like, if there's any kind of chemicals in the wells? Or, I mean, do they do any of that kind of thing, or is?
Well, on this particular project, Department of Health would probably have some water testing requirements for the water that was intended for domestic or public use, because they're serving a certain amount of people. They would probably have certain obligations through our county sanitarian would oversee that through a public health standpoint. That may not affect any wells that are used for irrigation purposes unless there was reason to believe that there was a contaminant getting there.
Okay, so basically, because they're using wells also for human consumption, they would have an interest in not, drawing the plume or whatever over from the landfill over to them. I mean, they're probably going to have an interest in, not, ensuring that doesn't happen, so.
Any other questions? Commissioner?
I guess on that same subject, what's the gallons proposed? I didn't see that in the worksheet at all. Is there an estimate or a thought of how many gallons are going to be pulled for irrigation and domestic use?
On a daily basis, I wouldn't be able to give you a number. That is a number that would be deciphered exactly through the DNR process. They would be required to do what's called an aquifer study to determine whether or not what they're proposing. There is a number that I don't have on the top of my head that they talk about for the establishment period, which would be a little bit higher because naturally when turf is getting established, you use a little bit more. But I'm not, I don't have a number for you on the what would be the likely annual use.
If I can follow up?
Oh, yep.
So, and I know they've already done some work out on this land, but when does it allow to do all these things? I mean, is there a timeline where this starts and then after that they can go, or isn't that set up anywhere in this?
So the state rule does not allow for any final governmental approvals to be given on a project until environmental review is completed. And so what we were not able to do is authorize any permitted work, and what the applicant was not allowed to do was to begin any sort of construction. So to enable a property owner to move around on a property, make a trail or something like that would not be commencement of a project, but anything that would begin to require permitting, anything that would be a physical manipulation of the land that starts a construction would not be allowed.
Commissioner Berg?
I'd just like to refer everybody to the report in our packet addressing all these issues. That way I understand there has not been work started, and that's what you're saying. And there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication out there, what's happening, and I think a lot of the answers to that are there in this report, if you look at that. I commend you, Mr. Van Dyken, for all your time and effort you put out there. You've been out there 3, 4, 5 times just to try to find an eagle's nest on hearsay information. And and I commend you that you're concerned and you're dotting every I and crossing every T on this project, that it would be a safe project to move forward. I feel comfortable with this report that you are giving to us.
So this is kind of the question period. Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric, I'm going to have some questions about water. And I want to reference an article in the New York Times from September 3rd of this year that referenced the drought in the summer of 2021, where large irrigators within the state collectively pumped at least 6.1 billion gallons more groundwater than allowed under their state permits. Nearly a third of that overuse happened by one company. This is up in the Pine Sands area, where we have to grow, apparently, the perfect potatoes so that we can have McDonald's French fries. People were very concerned about their aquifers then, and in fact, a hydrologist from the Department of Natural Resources was quoted as saying, "We have this really intensive groundwater use expanding to aquifers we don't yet understand very well in places where domestic wells have never had to compete for groundwater. As a result," she said, "we may not be leaving enough groundwater for future generations." Now, given this, what confidence can we actually have that the DNR is not going to do the same thing in this case? If they need to blow past their permit, what's the penalty? What's going to happen? Apparently, in the case of Big Ag, nothing. And if this is a smaller version of that, I can't imagine it even being on their radar.
A couple things I would note. One of the things to know about this area that's unique to perhaps where it was being compared to there is that we don't, within this region or within this aquifer, have other large-scale users. The DNR has clarified that for us, that there are no other large-scale users in this. The area that you were referring to, I've driven through that area. There's a center. You can't throw a rock from one center pivot without hitting the next one. And the other thing to note about that is that you're up in a Pine Sands region. We're not in the, like, just a little ways to the north of us is an area of greater concern, the Bonanza Valley. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It has also greater sandier soils. There is a little bit of a misunderstanding on this site that we actually don't have terribly sandy soils on this site. Most of it would be what we call a Sunberg Waddenhill or Waddenhill Sunberg, which is actually a clayish type of mixture. So it isn't a super permeable soil there. And so I think we would want to be careful that we don't take a broad concern about an area of highly, highly intensive use and import that into this discussion. And I think honestly, we have to have a reasonable trust in our state regulation and agencies. I don't know that we can operate coherently as a county if we don't begin there somewhat. Minnesota is known as a quite robust state as far as environmental protections. Certainly not perfect. I don't think at the local level where we would ever say we're perfect, but we do, and the state sets this process up to say we can trust that we have regulations and we can expect them to be followed. And if there are cases where an agency doesn't do their job well, I think we have accountability mechanisms for that, both at the legislator, the Office of the Legislative Auditor, and in different places like that. So I'd speak generally that way. I could not speak specifically to overuse with those ag producers.
To be clear, you mentioned the Bonanza Valley. This area is not in the DNR Bonanza Valley Water Management Area.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Did you have more questions?
I do. So let's talk about the water usage, which Commissioner Anderson asked about. The only place that I could find anything that might even compute was a statement in the EAW that the irrigation pond would be built to hold about 6.5 million gallons of water, and that would be approximately a 10-day supply. And that the pond would be the primary source of irrigation water, and the well would be secondary. If that's a 10-day supply, and we've been having drought for 3 years now during the summer, I submit that it's the other way around, that the well would be the primary source of irrigation water for this project. And if you do the math, if you just assume that they're open for 180 days a year, that they're going to be irrigating, at 650,000 gallons, it's 117 million gallons through that period of time. But there's a spot in this EAW that says, well, you know, it could potentially be 1 million. So now you're talking 180 million gallons of water. Given that we know so relatively little about our aquifers in the big scheme of things, especially with all of the different pressures that our aquifers are under today, it seems to me like an EAS is the only way to go to make sure that we have the proper answers as to what the impacts could potentially be. You mentioned the Bonanza Valley Groundwater Management Area, and that is noted in the EAW. And it is noted as an area where growing needs for domestic water supplies, irrigation, industrial, and other uses suggest groundwater use might be or become unsustainable, while the site is not included within the GWMA. Some of the same geologic and hydrogeologic conditions that led to the creation of the GWMA may exist in the surrounding regions and require an increased awareness of groundwater resources in the area. Would this not indicate that there's more work to do to understand what the impact is going to be upon from this project on our groundwater?
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. I would offer that the answer to that would be no, because the Department of Natural Resources does all that work. They go through an extensive process for that. And we know that to be true. So we know we can conclude unequivocally that those things will be studied, considered, balanced, and limited as necessary in the permitting. So to that extent, and again, that's why the state rule doesn't say you have to study anything and everything that could possibly be studied. The state rule specifically tells us that we can and should consider how these things will be regulated on an ongoing basis.
And finally, there's a comment about endangered species. I'll use the term rather loosely because the monarch butterfly should be considered endangered, but there's literally no room on the endangered species list for it. It's, last I saw, it was like 9th on the list to get there. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife says, because species can move and site conditions can change, the species on this list are not guaranteed to be found on or near the project area. To fully determine any potential effects to species, additional site-specific and project-specific information is often required. I don't think monarch butterflies or pug-nosed shiners know what the boundaries are between plots of land. So I think it's entirely reasonable to think that that species could be in the creek in this at this site, and monarch butterflies certainly are no respecter. I mean, they don't know where they're going, right? So I'm seeing some issues overall with what I feel are major concerns, but they don't appear to be able to be addressed within the framework that is this EAW.
Mr. Gardner, is there a question for Eric?
There is not.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? So I just want to make sure that the conclusion of staff, and I'm going to read it. The conclusion by staff is there were no significant environmental effects identified which have not been adequately addressed by the developer or will be resolved through the ongoing enforcement of existing regulations and permits. The EAW for the Tepetonka Golf Course project in Lake Andrew Township is adequate, and therefore a negative declaration is made on the need for an environmental impact statement. So that is the staff's recommendation that there not be an environmental impact statement. How does the board wish to proceed?
Mr. Chair, what you just read, could that then be the motion? Or do you have to just have a negative motion or a positive motion?
Well, if you want to move a motion to support staff, you can just say, I move that we do not need a environmental impact statement.
Mr. Chair, I move that we do not need an impact statement.
So there's a motion on the floor that we do not need an environmental impact.
Clarification, are you including the findings of fact as articulated in that motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Attorney Baker. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second to declare that an environmental impact statement is not needed for this project. Now I will open up the floor for further discussion. Thank you. Gary, stay close by in case there are more questions. Or I mean, Eric, I'm sorry, in case there are more questions.
Roger. Maybe Eric, maybe this is a question you're going to have to answer. It just came to my head, and being in the farming world, we have to have a 30-foot setback from every creek, any water area that goes through our land. Is there going to be a 30-foot setback on the Shakopee Creek that can't be mowed, can't be developed, can't be touched?
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Generally speaking, the Shakopee Creek is governed under the shoreland ordinance section of our county zoning ordinance. Every water body in the county that's a classified water body, which Shakopee Creek is, has an area next to it of greatest protection called the shore impact zone. And the shore impact zone around lakes and streams is limited as to how much activity can occur there, how much manipulation of, say, the natural environment, either the physical geography of it, like moving dirt, or the vegetation. In most cases, so let's say if you own a section of lakeshore, you're allowed to do manipulation across about 25% of that. We know that historically that's been mostly exceeded. In this instance, the vast majority of this running length of this stream, which is well over a half a mile getting through there, doesn't have activity, either vegetative alteration or topographic alteration being done within the first 50 feet of it, which would be the shore impact zone. There are a few places, few isolated places commensurate with like people being able to manipulate a certain portion of their shore impact zone, well under what theoretically could be allowed. So the stream corridor, that's one of the neat things about this project is that while it's near the stream, if you look at a map of it, actually the vast majority of the golf course is a fair ways away from it. It shoots across it at different points, and there are a few green locations that get near it, but with the bluff that's there that needs to be protected and can't be horsed around on, and the shore impact zone, the vast majority of that stream riparian area, I would say, is going to be remaining untouched.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Burke.
can I just follow up on that question as well with you? There are several other golf courses in our county, and most of the board serves on some watershed district board or committee. Has there been issues, and several of those golf courses we have, for example, Hot Creek goes right through Raymond Golf Course, as well as Wilmer Lakes and so forth are part of that as well, and then Wilmer Golf Course. Have there been any issues about the impact on the aquifers in those areas, or the use of the waters, overuse?
I'm not aware of any from speaking with our DNR area hydrologist.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yeah, so, we're kind of under discussion, right? So-
Right, but,
so-
oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so for me, my major concern was the water usage. But the DNR, they say that they're going to, they need to get a permit through the DNR and that they're going to monitor it. Because I'll just read this, what the DNR letter said. The EAW identifies potential concerns related to groundwater quantity given the available information for the area. And the proposed project will require a DNR appropriations permit to appropriate more than 10,000 gallons per day and/or 1 million gallons per year, as identified in the preliminary well construction notification number. Additional testing will likely be necessary as part of the appropriations permit process to acquire information on the source aquifer so that DNR can determine if your potential water use will impact other users or resources located nearby. And I just thought that was, for me, that makes me feel better that they are being watched. And so if, my experience with DNR, you don't ever want to go against them. So they can come down pretty hard on you, in my opinion. And then their summary was the DNR appreciates the effort project proposers are making to create a multifunctional landscape by incorporating native prairie, wetland, and stream bank restoration into the project. DNR staff are available to advise on restoration activities and design elements, and to help align the project more closely with the prairie plan and MWAP for questions related, and contact them. But I just think hopefully that the Tipitonka people will continue to work with DNR and hopefully Soil Water Conservation District. And I look at it, to me it's a win, because I think they are trying to resolve some issues that are in that area on that Shakopee Creek watershed, and hopefully they keep their word and they do what they say they're going to do. So.
Let's keep the comments down and the reactions. So Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This body has one opportunity to get this right. And in defense of water, I would say that it appears that we're going to fall short in that effort today. Now, I hope that it's made abundantly clear to the proposers that these folks over here, your neighbors, are highly concerned with what this project could potentially do to their water, their way of life. I don't want you to take this lightly at all. If anything, do more, because it appears that this is going to happen today, but it is going to happen without my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Bird?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments about it. I had an opportunity, I did talk to one manager of one of the local golf courses and asked him a question about rules and regulations and monitoring and what's all involved in that. And the golf courses are, existing golf courses are monitored and regulated on so many different aspects of the fertilizer they use. And the people that sell them the fertilizer can only sell them certain stuff. There's all this regulation taking place. And this whole project is going to emphasize what I understand what you're saying. Is all these other 12 agencies are going to be in this whole process going on. It's not like this is the final decision. there's going to be still so many checks and balances taking place. And reading through all the comments for your report, from your report, all the boxes have been checked. And I normally wouldn't be concerned if I felt there was a risk environmentally moving forward about money. But if we can check off all the boxes, and I think we have to be somewhat fair to everybody, including the people who have the project that they want to proceed this direction. As you pointed out, and I did some also checking, I don't know how accurate my figures are, but they're pretty well like yours. It can cost tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this full study, as well as take up 1 to 2 years, and you said even possibly more. And I'm not sure this kind of business, I have not had any conversation with them, I'm not sure where they are, but I just really appreciate them trying to put this business here, and I see all the boxes are checked off, and I'm comfortable with the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Dale Anderson?
Well, if we're open for discussion, I guess, you know, I understand everybody's got their opinion on this table and everybody's got their opinion out there, but I just don't know what we have to lose by doing this EIS. I mean, yeah, it's going to take maybe some time and it's going to take the developer some money, but at the end of the day, I can stand here and look at everybody in this room and I can talk to my constituents that are out in the country and I can say that we did go the whole way and we do know that this is okay or not okay. And right now, we can say it about certain things, but I don't know if we can say it about 100% of it. And I really just, being its discussion, I want to say thanks to all the people that I've gotten emails from. I know that I haven't responded to them. I've been busy, and I just wanted to openly say I really appreciate the input that people have sent to me. But I just think at the end of the day, I want to be able to look at everybody, and I want to be able to say, hey, we did everything we can. This is it's either good at the end of this EIS or it's bad, and then we can just go on with life and not have any regrets. And that's why I just will not support this. I just feel that if we don't do the EIS, we just haven't done our fiduciary duty to this project. And I'm not saying the project isn't good or bad, but I just think that way we have a true answer in our heart, and we can answer that one way or the other.
Mr. Chair, just like to restate what I stated before, too, is if we checked off all the boxes and we feel comfortable with that, I don't see a reason that we would risk possibly losing a very good business way of selling for our community. And I want to be business friendly, and I think putting extra dollars, making them go through extra hoops just because it's something we know and it comes out the same, and possibly lose that business because we don't know, I haven't had any conversation with anybody, if they would even continue to do it here and they could go some other place. I think we checked off the boxes and I feel comfortable, and there's going to be plenty of checks and things going forward, and I support this.
Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just something before we vote. Assuming that this will pass, and it appears that it will, what are the next steps? This goes then to the Planning Commission, and if so, when does that happen?
The golf course application for conditional use permit has been submitted to the county. It is scheduled at this point to be in front of the Planning Commission on November 13th, I believe is the date. We haven't sent out notices. We haven't had our October meeting yet, so that would be when I would anticipate that the golf course itself would have its proposal. That'd just be the golf course part.
So at any point in this process, and this is for the folks to my left here as much as anybody else, and for the folks out there, is this a public hearing? Is there a public hearing involved in a conditional use permit?
Yes,
And that would take place at that November meeting?
that is correct.
Thank you.
That's tentative. Notices have not gone out. Theoretically, things could happen in between now and then that would change that, but that is the schedule moving forward. Once the hearing has been scheduled officially, notices will go out and will be in the newspaper as per our usual practice.
Thank you for providing that information for everybody today. I appreciate it.
So before we call the question, I too would like to, chime in here as long as everybody else has. This has not been an easy consideration for any of us. I'm sure it has. I've read the environmental assessment worksheet at least 3 times. I've read the findings by staff. And at some point, when we look at the regulatory agencies that were listed in there, that we as the responsible government unit have to make sure that they are satisfied. And they, by not responding, appear to be satisfied with the environmental worksheet. I have to follow the science. In 1990, I was in the very first class of certified crop advisors in the state of Minnesota. And at that time, we'd go around to farms and we'd make recommendations for how much corn do you want to, what does your yield go on your corn crop? And we knew by science how much nitrogen it would take to raise that crop. And we tried to help those farmers not to spend too much money. And at the same time, we were helping the environment. And I'm sure that the golf course is not going to put money down Shakopee Creek that is wasted. And there are best management practices within the golf industry as well. So those BMPs that applied to agriculture also applied to our lawns, for example. And one of the things of note is that to irrigate a corn crop, it takes 2,500 gallons of water for every bushel of corn that you raise out on the landscape. So a 200 bushel crop, do the math at 2,500 gallons, and then a 160 acre or quarter section of land. We're talking probably in this case, 40 acres maybe of irrigated landscape out on that golf course of the 190 or so that are out there. So again, the science is not supporting, for me, it is not supporting further review of this. So I am going to call the question, and the way I'm going to do this is we're going to do a roll call vote, starting alphabetically, and so the way it works out, Dale Anderson, how do you wish to vote? Let me restate the motion. The motion is that we do not need an environmental impact statement.
I vote no.
So Dwayne Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berg,
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner.
No.
The chair votes aye, that we do not need the environmental impact statement. So the motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for your input and for your attendance here today. And thank you, Eric, for all your hard work, and the board for the robust discussion. And we'll take a 5-minute break, Commissioner Gardner. We will break for 5 minutes. Being the Kansas County Board of Commissioners meeting, we are to Resolution 2023-34, Board to Restrict Funds. Kelsey?
Good morning, Commissioners. Kelsey Baker, Kandiyohi County Administrator. Today, I'm going to ask approval for Resolution 2023-34 to restrict the funds for the Soil and Water Conservation District. Now, why, you might ask, why would you want to restrict these funds? Because, so when we,
Pizza.
sorry. So when we restrict these funds, when we do our 2024 audit, the $300,000 will not appear on our financials for our cash balance in our county building fund. That's why you board restrict them. Let's say the SWCD doesn't ask for these until mid or late 2024. They're still restricted. So let's say we wanted to go into our county building fund and use the 3.4 million that we have in our cash account. That 300,000 would not be included in that amount moving forward. That 300,000 will always be available now for the SWCD to use these for building projects. That's why we do a board restriction fund. You know, in the past, you maybe did a board restricted fund with Prime West Health when we were going to buy in. You maybe did a restricted funds on those. Why I like to do restricted fund resolutions is because you can always track those then moving forward, because sometimes, you know, it might be 2026 and we're like, did we restrict those funds? We have the documentation. We can give the documentation to our downtown financial staff, and then we can give the documentation to our auditors when we get audited each year. So that's why I like to do these resolutions, because they're a clear cut from the county to the respective organization and then for our financial staff. The other thing I wanted to note that's in the resolution is there's a couple blanks in there, blank spots, and we didn't add dates. So if you go down to where it says, now therefore be it resolved that the following funds be committed to SWCD as of, if you would like to put in today's date, October 3rd or October 4th, any amounts not used from the above restriction during the 2023-2024 fiscal year shall be then released from commitment as of, you know, do we want to put December 31st, 2024, December 31st, 2025? So if there's this window, so then when we send it over to SWCD, it gives them some timelines of when these funds are available. We can always revisit this. So let's say something were to happen in 2025, and they have $50,000 left in those funds. We can always go back to this resolution and amend that date.
So are you suggesting, Kelsey, that we plug in those dates today before we, obviously,
Yep.
before we consider the resolution?
I would recommend using October 4th, 2023 to December 31st, 2025.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
And, you know, Mr. Chair, you probably know more sitting and working with SWCD on that board, where they're at with their building projects. And what we could also do is ask Ms. Johnson to come back and do a presentation in the fall or next year when they've started their building project.
Yeah, I think what's important for them is to be able to move forward over the winter now. They'll be able to, you know, take bids and consider their options, so. Anybody have any comments regarding the proposed dates that Kelsey is considering?
Looks good.
So are we good with adopting? So whoever, if somebody makes a motion to adopt that resolution, include those dates in your motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move adoption of Resolution 2023-34, inserting the dates as recommended by the administrator.
So we have a motion on the floor to adopt Resolution 2023-34. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. I believe that takes us to the end of our meeting. I'm going to do this in maybe a kind of a disjointed area order. So I think we'll have you, Kelsey. Maybe that was your administrative update. I don't know. Do you have anything to do?
No.
Okay. And so we'll do our report outs, and then we should talk about our calendar a little bit, because I've noticed, at least for me, I don't think I have our December meeting on the calendar yet. And there's something that could affect that. So we'll talk about calendar last. So Commissioner Gardner, we'll start with you. And again, just a reminder to all of us, this is where we report out on our committees that we may have, committee meetings that we may have attended, both within the county and as we represent portions of the state or the state. So Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The day after our last meeting, I attended HRA board meeting. There was a robust discussion to be had regarding the duties and of the HRA, and I think that was well received by the board members. Visited regarding, let's see. No, that's incorrect. Had 2 meetings for the Woodland Centers. Had the program committee meeting as well as the regular board meeting. Chaired in the absence of Commissioner Dwayne Anderson, the Drug Free Coalition meeting last Wednesday. And then we met following that as the policy committee. And then on Thursday and Friday last week, we had a statewide SHAC, State Community Health Services Advisory Committee retreat that was held at the conference center here in Wilmer. And that was a good group consisting of folks from MDH, SHAC, as well as LPHA, local public health administrators. And we are having some issues with scheduling some further negotiations with one of our bargaining units. I think that hopefully gets sorted out today. And coming up, I had a couple of AMC policy committee meetings yesterday via Zoom, and that was interesting as well. So coming up, there's EDC Joint Ops Board will meet on the 12th, and then there's looks like there's an AMC Board of Directors meeting on the 13th as well. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Commissioner Dale Anderson.
Well, it's been a quiet 2 weeks for me because a lot of my meetings that would be in this gap here went every other month, so I kind of got lucky. But I've had numerous conversations, and I had a couple of meetings with Lake Andrew Township on the golf course. That's probably the biggest thing. So I really don't have much other than that I've done in the past 2 weeks. I feel bad.
Probably getting some harvesting done.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the last, what would be like 3 weeks or was it 2 weeks? I had 8 meetings. I met with C6 task force. I think the major thing there, I think I can talk about it, is they're getting body cameras for a bunch of their task force members. I think they're $1,000 per unit, which, per person then basically. So it was, I was kind of surprised by the cost, but I guess they got to have pretty complex equipment, and they got to be able to download the video and all that when they go in. So one of the major concerns was that people would be able to identify them, because they can, they can access the videos if they need to, the defendants. But what they do, I guess, if individual is concerned, they'll wear a mask and they mask up. So that was that meeting. And I met on the 21st with the Pioneer Land Library System Executive Finance Committee. Basically, everything's just kind of going good with that. They recently, I'm assuming by now they are done with all their computers. They replaced all the computers in the Pioneer Land Library System, which is, I believe, 32 libraries in the area. So they just recently upgraded or replaced all them. And I looked at a couple that were in the library there in Wilmer, and they've really gotten compact. The screens are real thin, and the towers or whatever for the computers are real compact. I mean, it's amazing how computers have changed over the years. So that was that meeting. I attended a JD 99 drainage hearing on September 26th down in Olivia. That was a relatively quick meeting, other than we had some issues connecting up via Zoom with some people that wanted to, well, basically the attorneys, they wanted to do a little presentation. We had a hard time hearing them, and finally they were able to connect with them and get that solved. Otherwise, it would have been a quick meeting. On the 27th, they had an armors meeting. That was pretty much routine. And then on that same day, I had a conflict with Drug Free Coalition, but I believe Commissioner Gardner sat in instead of me, so that helped that he was able to do that. On the 28th, I had a UCAP meeting. If anybody ever has the opportunity to attend those meetings, I always kind of admire how they run that partnership. The accountant, or I'm not sure if he's accountant, it's Randy Suter, I think is his name. He runs that place as if every penny was his. And so it's fun to watch. People will ask him questions, and I don't think they've ever stumped him. He can always find the answer, and it's several $1 million that they operate with, and as well as Deb Brandt. If you ever ask her a question, she has the answer for you, and so it's a really well run partnership, I guess you'd call it. Then on the 2nd of October, which was yesterday, I attended EDC Broadband, and it's amazing how things have changed in the last 2.5, 3 years since I've been on as a county commissioner. When I first got on, it was kind of doom and gloom, and nothing was happening. Now everything's happening so fast you can't hardly keep up. The Federated project is either on schedule or slightly ahead of schedule. And then we have the Vibrant project, the Reconnect up in the northeast corner, where they're working on that. I guess I don't know how far along that's going, but there is going to be kind of an open house for Vibrant on I think it's December 6th in Atwater at the community center. So people that are in the area or interested or curious, they can go there on that day to.
So that's not for the Reconnect grant, though, is it? Is that?
Well, Vibrant is part of that, so
Right.
they'd be able to address
But
it, I'm sure. So if
I was
you.
thinking that the Atwater area was on one of the.
Yeah, so
grants.
so it'll be, so Harrison
We're gonna be in
Township.
St. Paul, that's why.
Oh, okay. So it'll be Harrison, oh, that's right. So Harrison Township, and then it would be like East Lake Lillian Township, Lake Elizabeth Township would be involved. But I'm sure anybody in that Reconnect area would be able to go there as well. I don't know if they were, I didn't ask if they were going to invite them or not, but I'm assuming since it's Vibrant, they'll invite them as well. So with that, the Harrison Township, they're planning on starting it this fall. I don't know. Nobody really knows if they've started on the ground yet or not. But once they get moving, they go pretty quick. So that was that meeting. It was relatively quick, and they are looking at new projects. There's 6 townships that they're looking at, and I guess the next round of these border-to-border grants might be starting, they were told October, but they haven't heard yet. So hopefully in the next couple weeks, they get that announcement made or whatever, that they'll be accepting applications. Then also I attended the Vision 2020 or 2040 meeting yesterday, and Ken Warner, he's basically done with that now, and I can't remember the name of the guy that is going to co-chair along with Sarah Carlson. What was that?
James Miller.
Yeah, James Miller. Okay. So and he'll be good. He's very active on there, and so I guess Ken Warner, he'll probably be missed because he was willing to take on those kind of roles, and but then he's moving on, and when people move on, there's people that are nervous about it. But I always say, well, you never know, the next person might do a better job or might not do it the same, but they'll have different view on how things are done. So that's my report, I guess.
Thank you. Corky?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a Woodland Centers meeting as well, and also Woodland Centers had their annual retreat at the Prairie Lakes Environmental Learning Center, and that was on the 22nd morning, and I attended that as well, and it's recognition and support for the staff and team building type of activity. But being part of Woodland Centers Board, it really helps me even understand more the need for mental health care. That we got a lot of programs out there, but to meet the need, how much of a need there is ever since COVID, I think. So that's a very interesting meeting. Also, I had a Prairie Lakes Youth Program meeting, and it was a very good meeting. We did had some conversation about potential per diems for next year, as well as the Prairie Lakes Youth Program is expanding their secure unit, and we had like swing beds, and we're in the process of, and actually October 1st was the first day of that, and we got 16 beds there, and there's unfortunately a need for that, and I think this will help the organization to be more functional as well. They're doing some remodeling and putting in some new carpeting in, and Administrator Baker has met with Holly too about some of that, and so we got some follow-up ideas possibly along that same line, as well as maybe we even talked about earlier this spring, maybe have a visit down the road if we could. That would be really good, because I think maybe some of the commissioners have not been there, and with all the changes too. Another committee, Law Library, I had a Law Library meeting, and we had talked about the clinic, where there are attorneys that we use the funds for. They come in and help people find out information about if they can't afford a lawyer, some of their legal stuff. And we talked about exploring the dollars using for a mediation program, but it was just general conversation, not going down there, but helping the courts out with the money from the fines. But that was just a general discussion, no action, and I'm not sure it would be appropriate for those dollars to use that way. And then we talked about using some dollars too that we have available in the reserves that it was suggested that we improve the room itself. It's pretty bare and outdated, and we need to make some improvements there. Otherwise, that is probably the extent of my meeting. So,
All right, thank you. I'll try to be brief. I just want to comment about your Dwayne's comment about UCAP and the accountant. It's amazing the work that UCAP does. It really is. And I just am so impressed with what they do and the support they get. And it's really good that accounting is strict, because people think that people are taking advantage of the system. And he's an example of it not being taken advantage of. So we had a building committee meeting. I think I wasn't at the last meeting, as you all know, so that meeting may have happened before the last meeting, but I wasn't here to report out. We continue to have those meetings. If Dale hasn't, you must have reported out last time. I'll just move on. And like you, I was at the AMC Fall Policy Committee, which I thought was a pretty good week. At Transportation, we thought we had so many wins last year, there wasn't going to be much to talk about, and we were the last policy committee to get out the door, because we did a very robust discussion about greenhouse gases and how they affect construction in rural Minnesota, and that's could be a real big issue for us, adding a lot to the cost. I was invited to the Sibley State Park Improvement Association meeting recently, and when I went out there ahead of time, I drove around, and they are using goats to control buckthorn out there. And so I drove up one of the trails, and the goats are right along the trail, but I've heard they've escaped. Ralph says they've escaped out there. So we'll find out more about that in the future. But the other part about the association is they have a new manager, relatively new naturalist, and It's a pretty aggressive group. Dr. Roger Strand, who passed away within the last few months, contributed a very generous gift to that association for the work that they do. Then on the week ago, yesterday, I was to the Counties Providing Technology, CPT, meeting in Morris. That's, I think, a 19-county joint operations or joint powers board. And kind of a lot happening over there. We do a lot of stuff. A lot of counties do have auditing services from them and property taxes, and some do more, some do less. But they've changed executive directors recently. And the person that is now the executive director, at least as an interim, if he's not full-time, is Mike Kaler, who's been there for a long time. And one of the things that was discussed fairly at length was the previous director had convinced the board and suggested to the board that our business that we do with 4 counties or maybe 5 counties in North Dakota was not paying off. And those counties in North Dakota were very upset to hear that, because their only alternative was a company that was going to charge them way, way more money and provide way, way less services. In fact, one county did sign on with the new provider, spent $125,000 commitment that they won't get back. And our executive board went out to North Dakota and visited with each one of those counties. And they all said, if you'll take us back, we'll come back, even though we are going to lose that $125,000. So I think we've mended the fences with those counties in North Dakota and may have an opportunity actually to pick up some more counties as clients. So that was all good. And then, of course, I was at the Transportation Alliance fly-in. Last meeting is why I was absent. I think it was probably the biggest contingent that we had from Minnesota. That was a Minnesota Transportation Alliance fly-in. We convinced the mayor of Willmar, Mayor Reese, to join us, and so that was good. The delegation is always they say it over and over and over again, the appreciation they have that we make an effort to go out there. I'm going to let Mel talk a little bit more about the details, but for those of you who know, or knew, I should say, unfortunately, Mayor Smogluski from Granite Falls, I was sitting at his table when his medical emergency arose that caused his demise, and so that kind of put a pall on the dinner that night. But he's going to be greatly missed, not only in Granite Falls, but he was at every meeting I ever attended in Washington, and he was a great champion for not only things around Chippewa County, Yellow Medicine County, but up and down the Highway 23 corridor. So I think there's a celebration of life on October 28th. So Mel, we made Mel take notes of the various meetings we went to and what we advocated for while we were there.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I was wondering why you wanted me to go so bad. No, but for the record and for the people, for the board here, we were able to meet with 6 of our congressional members of Congress. And the thing that's, first of all, what we did is we thanked them for the money we did get. We got $4.8 million that they all sent a letter of support for our rail crossing elimination on south of the Willmar Y. And then the second thing that we did ask them for to make sure, remind them, is Highway 23 runs kitty corner across the state through 4 congressional voting districts. And we have a piece down where the MnDOT just completed an interchange on Archon Road 5 and Highway 23. And it's a 2.5-mile piece that's graded, just not paved. And so we did remind them that you may see or hear more from the Highway 23 Coalition and the constituents up and down, all the members of the coalition. So, and that was very well received. And I think, and then they did it's a busy 2.5 days when you're out there, very busy. You get up at 6 in the morning and you go till 11 at night or whenever we're done. And, but one of the things that kind of echoed, and I think we've reaped the fruits here in this county, is these people like to see people at their office. They like it when local people come to Washington to visit them. I think all 6 of them said it's a cumulative impact versus a one and done impact. They like to keep the relationship going, and I know there's only about a dozen, I think, local agencies that actually go to these fly-ins, but they really encourage people to do it, encouraged us to continue to come back, whoever represents the county. And it was very good. And then on the last day, the Commissioner of Transportation talked, and then the Met Council, Charlie Zelli, who is the former commissioner, spoke. And a lot of the theme is that there's a lot of money with the federal money for the next 4 years, that make sure you think and don't be ashamed to apply for grants. So with that, it was very productive, very busy, and as always, a very good reception for our group.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that relationship building when your congressperson and/or senator start to not need your name tag to remember your name. That means you've built up a relationship that can be significant. So thank you. Corky, you had something you wanted to
Two
add?
quick things, if I may. I forgot to mention, we had a PAC-4 retreat, sort of annual retreat this past 2 weeks, and it was a very good meeting, and they're getting some more grants. And I was just thinking maybe if there's time in a future meeting that we get an update for the whole board from PAC-4, if that would work in. They're doing quite well, so some really positive things to share. Also, I just want to quickly give an update on the 18 County Mental Health Consortium, and I've been talking to Administrator Baker, and she's involved in this as well. As you know, in the past, we went to Prime West because of cash flow for our 18 County Mental Health Consortium, and borrowed some money from Prime West to usually at the first of the year because of the way the grant's set up with DHS. And the 18 County Mental Health Consortium works off grants. And the way it comes in, it does not work out for us. And we're trying to problem solve that with DHS, but we always run into a cash flow. And we're still working on that, and we're still having trouble with DHS with that. And it was discussed, and there's a meeting coming up on Friday, and that annual meeting is electoral officials, mainly on that as far as the votes go. But that's going to be on the agenda. There's some discussion what we should do. It has been suggested on the agenda that, and we talked about this prior at one of our meetings too, about maybe the counties would have to, if they'd be willing to put some money in, with the idea that the money's there, but if the 18 County Consortium dissolved, that we would get our money back. And the number they're talking about is from the 18 counties, each county would be putting in the same amount instead of by population. And so it'd be approximately $20,000. And so maybe coming back with that request to the board, if we'd be willing to do that. And that would give them enough reserves for this cash flow to operate in the future for their services. So it was really much needed. And then I just really want to thank Roger and Mel for taking your time from your family and your private life and flying out there. It sounded like it was a very working situation.
I didn't know I was capable of putting in 15,000 steps in a day anymore.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you.
When Mel says that's what we did then.
Representing us all, so thank you.
One thing I forgot in my report, and a lot of people are gone here, but I brought it up last spring and I'll bring it up again. Our mail delivery system is not what it used to be, and our property taxes will be due before the next board meeting. And so this is our last opportunity to remind people that property taxes are due on October 15th. And if you depend on your mail carrier to pick that up on October 15th, you may be disappointed. So I think in the future we should consider putting a public service announcement out on that. So let's go to dates. Kelsey, you did tell me that we had discussed our meeting.
Yeah, and if I may, just to remind everyone, we'll be doing a report for ARP dollars. And funds, at the October 17th, I have met with Holly Booth with Prairie Lakes Youth. And then I'll be presenting that I had also done in April, where we're at with our broadband dollars, because we have a really good estimate just following our broadband committee meeting. And then the Housing Trust Fund, that we also talked about those dollars, what we would like to contribute. And then county technology needs, and then the remainder of the dollars. And just to remind everybody, I would like you to have some consensus or direction for the staff on how we can allocate those funds at the October 17th meeting. Those dollars don't have to be allocated until December 31st, 2024.
So, are we considering a work session then on those? Because there's quite a bit in there in terms of, I don't even know what our uncommitted amount balance is in there right now.
So I think it's around 1.18.
And we had-
1.34.
We had some preliminary discussions
Yeah.
at some point about housing and daycare and those kind of things. And maybe if we have that information sent around to us, we'd be better prepared to either have the conversation and come to a conclusion, or at least take it under advisement. So, because
Yeah.
there's kind of a lot in there.
Right, and you have that information. We've already contributed to the childcare. That was at 150,000. The board has taken action on that. That's already been passed on to the EDC. I'm not sure where the city is at with that, but the county and the city did 150,000 for childcare. That's, I want to say the EDC has already asked for that funding.
Yeah.
So we're good there, but yeah,
But a summary would be great.
I'll provide all that information in the board packet along with the opioid discussion. I've been working with Caroline Kahn, the new Health and Human Services Director, Sheriff Tullifson, Tammy Jo Lieberg, and Shane Baker on kind of the direction and the recommendation that we want to provide to the board. I think I've talked about this before. Per legislative federal statute within these opioid dollars, you have to have a sort of a public comment period for the constituents of your county or local government entity. And so we'll provide a recommendation on that at the 17th as well. We've been working on policies. I'm grateful for our policy committee. We've had really good input. I just want to say, on the record, it's not something that we take lightly. We add discussion points in there. We have very frank discussions regarding the changes that we're making. For the employee handbook, we reviewed pages 1 through 24, and it took us 3 hours, and we weren't really finished. I think we got to page 16. So when we work on these policies, it isn't anything taken lightly. We go back to staff and we ask them, what's everybody's thoughts? But moving forward, we have to go off the consensus and the working environment that we are in right now. And so I just wanted to mention that. And then also, lastly, I'm meeting with Karen Anderson this week. We finished our audit with Clifton Larson Allen. We haven't done anything like this in the past with this state auditing firm, but I would like to present the audit to the board at a public meeting. Full board, that would be done in November. There would be a rep or an auditor, I should say, from CLA that would come out to the board meeting and explain all of the financials. And I think that would be really good information when we have new commissioners on the board and when we haven't ever done anything like that. So we are hoping to have that presentation done in November. I think that, and it never correlates with budget season, but it gives the board a really good idea of where we're at with our financials, and you have that document. So you'll always have that financial statement document. And then it'll be the board's time to ask those questions to CLA on how they conduct our audit. And maybe, if we might have some findings and things like that. So I think that's a really good, transparent way to go over the budget with the full board, with county funds. That's all I have.
It might be one of the next meetings.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, Mel reminded me. October 24th, Road and Bridge, if you can put that all on your calendars.
If it works.
If it works. I'm fairly certain it works because I've been asking Roger and Steve on a lot of dates.
I got commitments
Oh.
on that day.
The 24th,
Yeah.
Prime West?
No, actually, I'm on a committee for the River Area Agency, Agency
Okay.
on Aging Grants.
Okay,
And so
well, Mel and I will work on some other dates.
Well, no, maybe we should do it now because.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could, Monday and Tuesday are both open. I just.
So we got
so-
some extra day. I too am, that whole week is terrible for me. It's
Oh,
only the
okay.
personal. The 30th and 31st, we get a couple extra days.
Yep, yep.
Will you guys look at that?
How about the 31st in the morning? Would that work for everybody? Halloween?
Halloween.
Come in
kinda
costumes?
On my schedule.
Yeah, come dressed up.
I'm probably gonna go trick or treating.
So you'll send out a calendar invite to us, please?
That work? Let's check with Mel.
Mel
staff.
can?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this was when Corey Smith was here. I think we suggested that we do a tour of the plant because we were asking for the large bond amount. So what we would suggest is meet at the plant. We would do a drone tour of the roads. This is normally our fall road tour, but we would do a drone tour on the screen and then allow you time to look what we would do at the plant site. So it would be kind of a work boot day, if you will, out there.
Perfect.
So if that works for everybody, the October 31st, we'll put that on our calendars. We'll send that out.
That's at the Green Lake.
Yep, we'll start out at Green Lake. I'll have Mel work on like an agenda,
Okay.
and he'll send that out.
Outstanding.
Give us an address then, so that,
Yep.
I've never been.
So,
And then,
go ahead.
and then you wanted to talk about the TNT, the Truth and Taxation meeting?
Yeah, so I think we set that for.
December 7th, a Thursday evening. So the
So-
AMC annual conference is Sunday through Wednesday. And we
So for some reason, that's not on my calendar.
I haven't put it on your calendar.
Oh, get it out there, because something else will go on there. I'll guarantee it.
so,
That's why I missed EDC yesterday, is because,
oh, it wasn't on?
well, they did it through a link, and
Okay.
they go by me a lot of times, so thank you. We also have a District 6 meeting. Steve, what is,
I want to say that is the 29th. Is that a Friday?
October?
27.
Oops, I'm sorry.
27th.
Wrong month. 27th.
Dawson.
Yep, Hilltop and Dawson, so it's one of those out-of-state meetings, so we're gonna have to.
But my question is, why 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
That's our
Drive there. Yeah.
So we have the District 6 meeting. We had just talked about the December meeting. So for anybody that's interested, as you know, our Minnesota AMC president, Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner McGuire from Ramsey County, is also the NACO president. And she is hosting a NACO board meeting in St. Paul that we're invited to go to. Our hotel room is going to be on our own. It's at the Intercontinental Hotel. The hard part is that meeting, I think, starts Wednesday night, so it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday we go down to the AMC meeting at the Hyatt. So it's a lot packed in there, but I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. And then, of course, the annual conference is, I think, December 5th or something like that. It starts.
3rd through the 6th.
3rd through the 6th. So anybody else have any calendar stuff?
But when are we doing the 5th, December 5th meeting? The actual-
7th.
The 7th.
That's the one you probably just got an invite to.
Yep.
Yep.
That was approved at the August 15th
And
meeting.
that's at 4:30, correct?
Oh, yeah.
I want to say
5:30.
5:30.
5:30?
Or I got it.
4:30, I've got 4:30.
You have it at 5 in this invite.
I got 4:30 written down.
Yep, 4:30, scheduling the
Okay, there we
truth and
go, there we go.
taxation immediately following at 6 PM to set
There,
the.
I got it. Yep, I do have it wrote down right now.
I'll fix that, sorry.
Because I'll show up at 5.
So
I'm going to accept
Okay,
that.
I didn't follow
It
that.
starts at 4:30.
You'll-
County Commissioner meeting,
Yeah.
and then at 6 o'clock.
I'll
we
just switch the
meet
time.
So one of
For
the, yeah.
truth and taxation, then we don't have to come back twice.
Anything else? If not, we are adjourned.
That sounds great. Better read-
Feels like